Hello and welcome to Wargameronline, and today we have a super special chat. We are joined by the man, the machine, the Australian AOS coach himself, Anthony. Welcome, mate.
G'day, thanks for having me. Super excited, big fan of the channel, and pleasure to be on.
Oh man, we're giddy to have you here. Also joining me, of course, we've got Luke and Fabian. Good to see you guys.
What up?
Hi guys.
Surviving the lockdown season 3. I think we're into now, but
That's it, right?
more on that later. This video is made possible by our patrons. Right, Mr. AOS Coach, I think, I'm a huge fan of yours, by the way. I kind of follow you on all of the channels. Really excited to have you on board. I just want to say that again. But for those people out there who are followers of WGO, do you want to tell us a bit about your background? What is it about Age of Sigmar? What are you into? What are you up to?
So I'm into long walks on the beach. I'm also into Lionel Richie. No, so my name is AOS Coach, or Anthony, as my birth certificate might say. I've been in the hobby now since 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I'm a big Empire player, a big fan of Karl Franz. I still believe Karl Franz is in the Mortal Realms, and if you don't agree with me, his name's on the Hurricanum and the Luminarch. So until you get rid of that off the model, he's prime time for me. But I've been playing Warhammer for a long time. When I was a kid, I was living in Sydney, one of Australia's largest capitals. And I moved to a country town, a very small rural country town of about 10,000 people. And it was actually in the people that I met at the time that they introduced me into the gateway drug with the Warhammer Quest. Then it kind of led to Warhammer Fantasy Battles. It led to, Necromunda, Gorka Morka, you name it. I got deep into the hobby, really enjoyed it, and it's very tied into my friends. And it's kind of followed me along my entire career, I guess. I've always been playing Warhammer. But what got me into YouTube, and I guess what got me into AOS was, so I made the jump. I made fantasy. I got a little salty, and when there was no rules, I'm like, put my toys down. Got into Frostgrave for a little bit. Really enjoyed like the skirmish side of Frostgrave. At the minute that General's Handbook came out, I was getting punched. By the way, like I think I was just getting annoyed that at the time the comps were trying to comp on wounds. Like, right, you get 50 wounds or 100 wounds at your tournament. I go, cool. So I'm being an Empire player. Like, what am I bringing? I'm bringing swordsmen. I'm bringing spearmen. What are other people doing? They're bringing Archaon and 3 bloody bloodthirsters. And I'm like, I can't compete with you. I have 50 militia dudes that are hitting on 4s. Like, I got nothing. And then they try to comp you with battalions. And, like, there was no good battalions for those Empire/Cities of Sigmar players now. But anyway, like, General's Handbook came out. Match play came in, points, loved it, got deep, hit the tournament circuit, and then kind of traveled the world. I went to Blood and Glory, which was the catalyst for the channel. I've been to Adepticon 2 years ago, and the passion has just kind of grown. Like, I think it's just the community and just telling awesome stories that has kept me here.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. It's interesting. You got into it pretty much as I left. My last edition of Fantasy was 3rd edition. So I'm showing my age there, mate. So it's nice to know. You just obviously picked up where I left off. I think
I was on the tail end of 3rd. It probably was like a tag team. You high-fived me as you were going out. But
So if you've travelled the world on the tournament scene, have you ever played against Luke then?
It's only Blood and Glory I've been to in the UK. And right. I didn't know anybody. I didn't even have the channel at the time. I was just some random Australian on the TGA forum, and I was in like a bit of not a midlife crisis, but I decided I want to take a career break in my job. I'm like, screw this, I'm done. I want to take a break. I want to travel. I want to just recalibrate. And Ben Curry's just like, come to my tournament. I'm like, okay. So I tell my wife, I'm like, we're going to England. So we went to England, went all around, but I didn't know anybody at the time. I think a few people were very kind, like Ben Johnson rocked up and said hello. The Facehammer guys were very kind, but
yeah.
Most people I didn't know anybody.
Yeah, it's a big part of this, though, isn't it? The community is fantastic. And I think it's, if anything, the community within Age of Sigmar as well has continued the tradition of that real kind of inclusive group of people just having fun. I've always been surprised that, because for me, I've been a kind of Luke likes to call me a fluffy player, not overly competitive, but I've done a few tournaments under Luke's encouragement, and they've always been a hell of a lot more fun than I expected.
They're always the way I describe it is they're always just a games weekend. Most people have these tournaments on a pedestal, like it's just like these overpowered players, and they're going to crush me, and I'm not going to have a good time. But actually, it's just a 5 games. You're going to play a lot of cool people. You're going to meet new armies. Yeah, you might have 1 or 2 competitive games if you're not striving to be top table. But most of the time, if you're in the middle table, it's just an awesome weekend and a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. So when tournaments resume, I can't stress enough for people to come out and hang out and play with their war dollies and meet up with people I haven't seen in such a long time.
And the beer as well, right? Like, come on, you've got to...
Well, yeah, you got the beers, you got the after party stuff. I know I've seen some of the UK events; they get pretty wild. But it's just it's just getting away from life and hanging out, playing Warhammer, talking Warhammer, laughing about Warhammer, crying about Warhammer. It's talking about your results and the dice betrayed you, and I got double turned or this happened, and it's always those stories that kind of keep you alive, and you start chasing the next tournament hit.
Yeah, I played fantasy. That was like where I started in fantasy, and at the back end of 8th edition, it seems like the tournament scene's almost got to that point. When in end of 8th, just the tournament scene was just like booming, and it's got back to that now. So I come back in then, and then it's just seems really good. All the people are good as well, aren't they?
Growing up in a small country town, I never got to go to any fantasy tournaments, but from everything I've heard, Sigmar, at least in Australia, Sigmar is bigger than it has ever been, like with fantasy battles. The tournament attendance is through the roof. Our last big tournament was 240 players. So I don't think we ever had tournament numbers around that size in any of the editions of fantasy battles.
What I find crazy about that is, Australia is not a small country, is it? You got a lot of space over there, so you must be all scattered all over. So logistically, how does that work then? Just people are prepared to travel in Australia? They come to these things?
Yeah, 50-50. I mean, I say this because literally last night I just bought a ticket to an 80-player tournament that I'll have to fly a couple of hours. It's like a 12-hour drive. So for any of the Americans, I know the Americans don't really fly to tournaments. They're obviously driving for theirs. For me, if I was to drive to this tournament in May, it's about a 12-hour drive from my house, or like a 1-hour flight. So it's nothing.
Yeah.
Yes and no. In the old days of in Sigmar, and even probably now that we're kind of coming back with COVID, people are staying quite local, especially because the way our government's been kind of working for a little bit. Even our states have kind of been putting up borders, and you can't cross those lines. So the local scenes have had to thrive, or there's been no Sigmar. Right. And then tournaments come up, and the passionate, privileged few who might be able to afford the time or the travel costs will go interstate. And a few weeks ago, we just had collectively about 120, 130 players at one weekend between 2 events, one in Victoria and one in South Australia. So they're quite distances, but yeah, just 120 players all playing Sigmar. So for the right event, people are willing to travel.
Well, I might have to come over for one of those. I mean, you talked about, obviously there are local events taking place. So, we can't do a show about Sigmar and 2021 without talking about COVID at some point. So you're having face-to-face tournaments in the Australian scene, yeah?
I just run a 48-player, one-day 48-player event. The demand is that high. I just mentioned I bought a ticket yesterday to Warhammer, which is a May tournament. It's 2-dayer.
Yeah.
That like 80 tickets sold out in 45 minutes. So people are crazy right now because they haven't hobbied in such a long time that the minute an event comes up, they're just grabbing it. So for tournament attendances, I think the question, one part of the question is how do you meet the demand versus the supply while keeping everyone safe and making sure that you don't overstretch yourself. You still need to give, at least in my country, you've got distancing requirements. So, we've got to have 2 meters between each table, or there's one person by 4 square feet or 2 square feet, depending on at the time. But yeah, tournaments are different. You've got to look at this a little bit differently. And I think, I got a bit of backlash on a YouTube post. I'm like, hey, I'm setting up for a one-day event. Like, how dare you have an event on? I'm like, well, hold on. Every government, every country has handled this a little bit differently. And it's about meeting those requirements. Again, they're the experts.
Yeah, absolutely. All you can do is follow the guidelines, right? If you're doing that, you're doing the right thing.
I started playing tournaments again. I mean, one-day events in August last year, September. But the main date was masks 24/7. So you had to play with a mask, which meant there was concessions. I had to speak louder. It means that, there had to be more space. There was a maximum people in an enclosed environment.
Yeah, I mean, I dare say in the UK we've got all of that to come, and it's going to take some getting used to. We're slowly coming out of the second lockdown now. There's talk of a third wave. It doesn't look good for the tournament scene for us in as we go into kind of the summer and the second half of the year. I'm hoping these things clear up. But the other fear I've got as well is, as soon as those tickets become available, they're going to be gone in seconds, and that's the... it's good, but it's also bad if I miss out, because I will be crying real tears of soul,
Well, it's interesting because that tournament weekend that I was talking about, so there was an event called SAGT, or South Australia GT, and it's traditionally an annual event that's 50 players, and it sold out literally minutes before tickets went on sale, like literally minutes. And it was actually through frustration in the chat of all of us missing out that we said, someone else set up a tournament, and literally then a 70-player tournament happened the exact same weekend to meet that demand. So while you're right, people are going to try to jump, it's such an opportunity for a lot of local events, stores and local promoters to go out and create their own events and meet the supply for people who aren't comfortable traveling, people who don't want to move far away, or because venues, my events are probably at half capacity right now. It's about then finding more spaces so you can run events. And I think more people need to step up as a tournament organizer. And I think it's probably one of my challenges right now is how do you promote more event organizers?
We've always talked about doing an event at some point, but never felt prepared for it. That's the thing. It feels like it's quite an uphill struggle to go from not doing one to doing one. There's a big gap there. I should imagine from going from your first one to your second one, great, but that first step always seems like an overwhelming challenge.
I mean, you're right. Like once you've done one, it becomes easier and easier. When I had my very first tournament that I ran, I relied on a lot of people. I relied on the local club that I was hosting my event. I knew that I didn't own the terrain, the battle mats and things. So I found somewhere that could, and I asked the community to bring a few pieces of terrain and help me scale. Again, it's them helping me help them, right? The more terrain and tables I've got, the more players I can have. And it was after that one event, I'm like, right, how do I source more terrain? Whether I make it with installation foam, or what I've ended up doing 2 years ago was buying a 3D printer that's then led to 2 3D printers. And now I own over 500 pieces of tournament terrain just because I've been 3D printing. So I've scaled as I've gone. Yeah. My events used to say bring a couple of terrain pieces each. Now I'm completely self-sufficient that I own everything I need and I don't need my players. And I'm willing to lend that out as well. Otherwise, that terrain's sitting in the garage. So again, it's about tapping into your community and realizing a tournament organizer doesn't need to do everything. And the community is normally willing to help. They'll lend you a battle mat that they own at home. They'll lend you some terrain. And again, that's a huge relief because I don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on things that I use once or twice a year.
How are you finding that obviously in Australia your models are a lot more expensive? How do you find the meta in Australia? Does it stay the same, or are people still like build for the power, or do they just tend to use what they have?
It's an interesting question you've asked because there is this misconception that Australia is in this weird meta, that we aren't in a true meta. And when I look at the tournament records that happened 2 weeks ago at SAGT, Vic GT, and even the tournament that I ran like literally last weekend, what's powerful in the world is still powerful in Australia. Lumineth Realm Lords, IDK, Seraphon, Zench, all of those problem armies, Lord Croak and his friends, Change Host, KO, drop down shooty, like all of that is exactly the same. But the difference in our communities is that because of the cost of models, I don't think Australia and New Zealand, which is the region, flip armies as quick as maybe the UK does. So I think what happens is Australia tends to find a way. And the prime example is this 70-player event that I was just at. There's a lot of destruction that was in the top 20. And it's not that destruction is crazy in the meta. It's that we will find a way with our Stonehorns. We'll find a way with our Iron Jaws, Iron Suns, or Big Warg. So we're willing to test things that normally people won't test. They'll go like, oh, this isn't working for me. Yeah. I'm just going to throw the towel in and I'll go pick up the latest filth. So at the flip time as well, we have this thing called, we have this weird cultural thing called tall poppy syndrome, where we don't like people getting too high and mighty on themselves. So no one has gone out and bought 80 Lumineth archers and is a jerk. I think they quickly lose friends that might stay on Tabletop Simulator. I don't know if it's a real thing on the tabletops. I know internet Tabletop Simulator is a bit different.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're in this weird bubble. At the same time, we do have some interesting lists. I think part of that is because of the pricing and just the way we see the competitive scene.
As a result of that, do you find that the middle tables normally is less filth in the UK, or less powerful list? Do you find that your middle tables is just as hard as it is on the top pet tables, kind of as you walk around, or even playing yourself, because you're quite near the top tables? I've seen some of your results; they've been quite good.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, I mentioned, the meta chasing, and I said, Australia doesn't chase the meta, or things like that. That's also false, right? I've got really powerful KO players. I've got people like Dave Kerr who are breaking the meta with Knights of the Empty Throne running around the 30 wound general. I've got the Vic GT I just talked about. It was Fangs of Sotek who won that event. So again, we've got people who are following the meta. They're following the meta. Yeah. Lumineth is following the meta. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of these stupid. Is it the kangaroo riders that are ridiculous pile-in rules that have just been announced?
Yeah.
They're going to be the latest filth. They're going to be the latest filth. Yeah, you charge, you then move out. You're
I mean,
that'll be popular.
I think I saw you beat Seraphon, didn't you, with Sons?
Yeah, but it was coalesced. It was still the filth, it had Croak and friends, and it was reducing damage by 1, which sucked. Yeah. But it wasn't the 1 million skinks or the salamanders coming from the sky burninating the peasants. But to answer your question, the fat middle, that middle table, the people who are not sitting at the top, not sitting at the bottom, probably is getting more competitive. There is more mirror matches. Seeing daughters versus daughters. I'm seeing, OBR versus OBR. You're getting a lot of mirror matches, and obviously only one person can win, one person can lose, and they are kind of hanging out in the middle. So I would probably say that because of the power level, you're not seeing a lot of Seraphon. Sylvaneth, you're not seeing a lot of Beasts of Chaos, you're not seeing a lot of Death right now. So there's a concentration on the higher powered armies. So yes, I would say that you're probably seeing more of a concentration and stronger fat middle than you have in the past.
There's something that stands out for me that you've just said that I don't think that happens over here in the UK enough. Listening to you right there, I think it's very important you pick up on that. Something you said then was that you guys in Australia, you find a way with your armies and you actually test matchups, which over here I don't think we do. I think we just kind of why I booed beforehand was about Seraphon was because at the moment there is a big despair at the moment in the UK about Seraphon and the fact that you just can't beat them. They're this unbelievable army. But I think you've just answered that question to everyone. Go out there, go and test with your army. Have you played against it yet, or have you just looked at it and just thought, "Oh no, I can't beat this." And that's absolutely fantastic and brilliant. And I think some of the listeners can definitely pick up on that. And I think that's an amazing point.
Well, that's part of the reason why I started my channel is, and part of the reason why I'm not the subject matter expert. I never try to be on my channel the subject matter expert. Could I read a battle tome? Could I write some lists? Could I do what other creators are doing? Yes, of course I could. But the reality is I don't have the experience to say to somebody, this is the strongest build of Heat Knights of Slaanesh, and this is how my experience can prove that it's more than just list tech, and I'm not using Maths Hammer. So, like for me, the Seraphon players in Australia, there's always been a really good Seraphon community in Australia, and they played it from the start when they got the very first battle tome, and they've played it all the way through, and like for 4 years until they got their next battle tome. So, which is why I'm also not very hard on Seraphon, because those players have been through the trash, and now they're getting the benefits. This is their time to shine, and they'll get nerfed again, and that's how it works. But these people have been there for the long run, and it's time that they win some games and enjoy themselves.
Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier, which I think is interesting, is the cost of Warhammer in Australia, which means people have to be, for want of a better word, economic in how they build their army. You're building the army you want, and not just spamming one unit over and over again, sort of thing. It's and for me as a more narrative player, I've always picked up an army and built the army that I want aesthetically. This will look great on the table. This is the amount of times I've said this will look great on the table, and Luke's told me to bin it. So it's like, just put that army in the bin, Phil. It won't do anything. And I think my Sylvaneth army, for instance, is one of those. And I know Sylvaneth don't sit anywhere in the meta, but from my perspective as a collection, I've got this wonderful rounded Sylvaneth army where I can more or less represent any unit in Sylvaneth, but not over-represent it. I don't have stacks and stacks of any particular one model. But what's happened over lockdown as we've been filming the battle reports with Jack is I've really honed my Sylvaneth play. Because I've been up against DOK, I've been up against Seraphon, I've all of Jack's nasty Lumineth. I've played against Lumineth with Sylvaneth, and comment after comment sometimes on those things. I'm not saying I'm a great Sylvaneth player or anything, but comment is, "Wow, I didn't expect you to last that long," or "Wow, that was a lot closer than I was expecting." And the stats haven't changed, but what has changed is my experience and time I've invested into what everybody sees as a subpar army.
You're right, and that's why as well. I never try to rubbish an army because I don't think there is any true rubbished armies. Any army can win on its day. It takes luck, it takes matchup, it takes the right scenario, it takes the right decisions throughout a full 3 hours. Beasts of Chaos can still win. Is it a harder matchup? Absolutely. But I think, to your point, it's about practice and deliberate practice. It's about practicing the deployment, practicing your decision-making, practicing those expected outputs of, if I charge, what's the likelihood? And if I'm going to play, let's say, Croak and Friends, what tools do I have in my army that can help me handle or put me in a better position? Again, Beast of Chaos versus Seraphon, tough matchup. But you know what? The expectation's off my shoulders. I don't have to win this.
Yeah,
it's up to you to win it, and I can now go ham and I can try some things. I can, bring on some different ideas, and cool, pressure's off. So I can't speak for America. I can't speak for England, but I think for us, we have this, and I might also come down to. I mentioned the 240 player event, CanCon. That's an annual event, happens in January. Unfortunately, this one is, we don't know what 2021 is looking like. But it's our annual event. So when Games Workshop says New Year, New Army, we don't care because we're all striving for this late January tournament. And everything we're practicing is deliberate practice, and we're hobbying for this milestone because we do display boards. So it's like an Armies on Parade. 2 years ago, we had Vince Venturella as one of our painting judges, so like checking things out. So for us, I think that's partly why also we strive for this road to CanCon, and we'll persist knowing that the meta's going to change, general handbook's going to change, scenario's going to change. It's just persisting and that journey to CanCon.
Yeah, I love that. I love that scene that you've got there. That's great. In fairness as well, I think something that Luke's pointed out in the past is, the missions can level armies. The game levels armies now. They focused really hard on that, haven't they? And you're right. Seraphon versus Beast of Chaos, tough matchup. But there are missions where you go, actually, I've I've not got an advantage, but I've got a helping hand. And I think that's the other thing that people. That's why you need to practice those missions, because you need to learn how to win those missions. I just played. I think it's either Border War. It's one with all 6 objectives right on the middle field. And I played that with Sylvaneth versus Daughters of Cain, and all I did was fly forward with a bunch of cheap units and capture a bunch of points right at the start of the game. And like you said, I turned to Jack then and said, right, you got to win it back from me now. I've scored a lot straight off. I'm going to score no matter how much damage you do in turn 2. I'm still going to score some more. Either way, you've got an uphill battle now. You're chasing me.
And I think that's where Tabletop Simulator starts coming in, and it's a tool that I can now, if I don't have a table at home, I can practice my army, I can practice my deployment, and I can re-rack. So I can deploy it one way and then kind of see my buff auras, and could I score the objective in turn 1? I can set up scenarios and situations, and then come turn 1, I can re-rack and go, right, what would happen if I try this and here, and what if I do this, and let's change the scenario so I can get more practice and exposure leading up to a tournament. I don't have to ask Luke, hey, Luke, do you mind if we re-rack? Can we start again? And Luke's like, oh, here we go. So you can get some real deliberate practice in, and I think that if you use that as a tool, you're going to be a smarter player on the table.
I mean, have you, going back to what you're saying about the weaker armies, the stronger armies have to win. Have you found that with Sons of Behemoth? Because there's been so much negativity of there's not a powerful army. Have you found that I've got nothing to lose going in with your games, or how have you found using them in your tournaments?
Yeah, look, I think for me, what's been really cool is that everybody I've played, so I've played probably close to 40 games now, maybe more, with Sons, and everyone I've played has been excited to play them. They don't know what they're getting themselves into, so obviously I'm very clear on this is what it does. I've got 5 War Scrolls. I'm like, this is all what it does. This is what it can do. This is what they are. And I think people are excited about, can they bring down a Mega Gargant, or how much of their army would it take to bring down a big boy, but also what can they do? And for me as a player, I've never felt more liberated in my life than with Sons, because the hero phase isn't complicated. I turn a dial on my command point and I might kick an objective. That's literally my hero phase. My deployment, I've got 6 models. I'm like, cool, done, whatever. I don't have to worry about screens. I don't have to worry about buff radiuses. I don't have any. So I just run forward. I just do this. I just smash things. But people underestimate them. I think people looked at the book initially and thought they were rubbish. They were like, oh, this is not a very good army. The costs are too high. But you know what? We've started to see them hit the tournament scene. They're harder to kill than they look. They have a lot of cool abilities that, and I'm not talking about game-breaking abilities, but they can be quite competitive on the table. They're not 5-0 armies. They're not Fangs of Sotek. They're not Change Hosts. But they hold their own. They hold their own. And that's where I want the game to be. Fat middle. I want an average army book to be a 3-win at a tournament list, and it's the player's skill, knowledge, luck, decision-making that takes them to 4 and 5.
Yeah.
If every army was like that, we would have an awesome competition, and it would show that we have really skilled players. What grinds my gears is when a player goes 5-0 with an army list that wasn't a skilled pilot.
Yeah, I think that's what the complaints of the UK is at the moment, right? With Fangs, that's the whole thing where that list can just be a beginner 5-0s by itself, doesn't it? Basically, so.
And I always worry that the game will become, because I know at one point 40k felt like a game of Armageddon, where you just it was an arms war, right? You had this army, and then it was just strength. And then you got absolutely, if you were released 6 months ago, you were so out of touch, and it was just chasing. I would hate this game to be an arms race. So and that's why when I did my Battle Time reviews for Daughters and for Hedonites, yes, it was a bit of a nerf, but it was bringing you in line. It wasn't that, your army is now rubbish. It's just you're now brought in line with every other player that's getting frustrated with all your prayers. getting frustrated with your fighting last. You got all this stuff, you get too much stuff.
Yeah. That automatically
Like come back and actually play Sigmar.
Yeah.
I think the game is probably the most balanced it's ever been, because there's so many armies now that are, like you're saying, are in that fat middle. Even the really weak armies like Ninehorn, say Goblins and Beastmen, they can still go 4-1 with the right player who's played enough games.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got really good players in Australia. People like Matt Tyrrell, for example. I'll give him a shout out. He has just been playing Nighthorn forever. Like, he's just a death player. And again, you persist, you chase the meta, you lose, and then you look at your army list and say, how could I change it? And, I played an opponent that had 160 chain rasp recently. Like, that unrenderable, summonable, like that's tough. And it was actually funny because I haven't played a horde in such a long time that I actually forgot some of the strengths of a horde, despite being a Gits player and having, armies of 200 Gits. I actually forgot how they played, and getting overwhelmed, and it's quite frustrating. So, every army has its chance.
Was that what the only loss, was it, at the tournament?
That was my only loss. That was me being an idiot more than my opponent. Like, my opponent's great, don't get me wrong. He knows he's awesome, but I was an idiot. I messed up my first turn, and then the minute I ended my first turn, I had this, why did I do that? And then it was always going to be a hard, because Gargants they ignore my rend. My ability gave me a +1 to hit on anything with a 4 armor save or less. He had a 5-up.
Yep.
The scenario gave him +1 for each objective for battle line, which was his whole army. It's like, why did I do it to myself? But it's learning. It's learning. You're like, right. You write that down. You're like, cool. Don't do that again. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of Sigmar, is you get these experiences, and instead of feeling powerless, you're like, right, if I'm in that situation again, what do I do? Do I have new tools? What do I need to think about and make better decisions?
Yeah.
Well, that game against the Nighthorn, I didn't lose a single model. Like despite having 178 models on the table, I didn't lose one. I didn't lose one Gargant, not even a Man Crusher. And at the end of the game, I had more models on the table than my opponent, and which is ridiculous.
Favorite game, yeah.
It was a good game. Don't get me wrong, but there was another game with my OBR where I got to stuff 2 of those Death Riders in the pants or the bag, so I rolled 6s. So again, like those little moments that are just awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Don't underestimate Gargants, guys. They are, I think people like me, and there's a few other people who have started to do well with it, are starting to show like, oh, actually, there's a bit of faith here, and people are now seeing results.
So we go back to the TTS thing. Did you play much TTS before going back to real life events, or was it just straight in? And
I played a little bit because my Discord is insane with TTS. My Discord has like 2 games at any point in time or more, 24/7, like around the clock. It's just got Discord. I didn't enjoy it. I think there was elements of TTS that I didn't enjoy, and that was the human interaction. And I realized that I'm in a very different world. So I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. If I was based in the UK and this was my only way to play Sigmar, I'd probably find a way, and I would love it. So don't get me wrong here. I don't know. I found it a little bit challenging to read the table as well as I did in real life, but I do see it as the tool that helps me deploy, helps me play people across borders that I would never really get to play, or might be a once in a lifetime thing to play someone like you, Luke. So I think it's going to be a great complement to our hobby moving forward. I don't think it'll ever replace tabletop, but I think it'll be an awesome complement. And I could see some people making some AI to help us play a one-player game and deploy to move around. I can see that happening.
Yeah, because all the auras that you have on TTS and the board is obviously just your screen, so it's so small. I find that when I do get back to the real table and play, it's going to be hard to get used to like pre-measuring everything when you take measure, making sure you're in the auras, there's going to be a lot of mistakes made. And it's just I wanted to see how you felt going back into real life, just gauging that 6x4 board, and it's just a completely different experience. And
the way I struggled for a long time because the way I read the table, I couldn't read it. Like I was making really bad decisions that I know I wouldn't make on the tabletop, because I think you're right. Like I'm still a player back in fantasy days, and Phil might remember this. When you had like a war machine, like a great cannon, you used to have to guess the distance, then add scatter dice. And I would pick my great cannon. I would know that from this point to this point is going to be 19 inches, and then factor in a dice roll and another dice roll. So I have a really good eye perception. But then when I got to the tabletop of Simulator, I'm like, what's going on here? But at the same time, like it made for really good fun, and obviously getting to play with people all over the world. Yeah. So for me, it was a really good casual, chill out, practice an army. Do I need to buy this model? Let's test it. Having a really cool opponent lets me go back and we can try things because it's a casual game. But I haven't enrolled in any tournaments, and tournaments as well usually happen when I'm sleeping. So I don't know how I would go with that one. Just I don't know. For me, like sitting behind a computer for 12 hours playing a tournament, I don't know. That's my kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. It's hard because people. The time thing is a problem. People just think there's all the time in the world to play a game where there's really not. It's still it's a lot harder in that sense as a tournament.
But again, I'm really lucky to be able to play real life. If I was in the UK going into my third lockdown of Electric Boogaloo, I probably would be all into tabletop. I'd be hitting hammer time. I'd be having Butcher's Buffet. I would be finding the time to be able to play because that'd be my only way.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been fortunate of just happening, to be locked down with my son, who's also, a great Age of Sigmar fan and player. So I've been extremely fortunate and recognise that. And it's one of the reasons we focused a little bit on, shifting almost all of our content to battle reports for this period. It's just, hey, there's a lot of people who just aren't getting games in right now. So hopefully this goes some way to keeping you sane, But it's been good. It's been good. But I have to say, both Jack and I are going. It'd be nice to have a game against somebody else because we know each other really well now. As players, we know each other really well, and it'd be good to try something new.
Yeah, at least diversity, and I can totally appreciate that. That's where Tabletop Simulator. Like if I'm trying to practice for a tournament and I don't know anybody, for example, Fire Slayers in Australia is not that popular. I don't see the appeal of some naked baby dwarves on the table and they don't do anything. And they don't really have an appeal here. There's not a lot of players, and I don't have to worry about Fire Slayers in Australia because, there's a few armies, but it's so few. But if I wanted to get some practice, TCS, I could either practice it myself, or I could actually play without any dollar investment, or I could find an opponent who's outside of my region. So again, it's an awesome tool. No different to AOS reminders, no different to JP's list analysis tool. We're getting a good arsenal of tool, and
you just need to dye that beard, Ginger.
I have one or two gingers in there.
We've avoided beard chat, haven't we, really? Just because it's quite obvious we know who's got the best beard. There doesn't seem to be much point talking about it.
What were we saying before we started the show? We had the evolution of beards here.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Coach, what does the future hold for you? I mean, you've gone back to normal tournaments, successful YouTuber. Tell us about what's your next plans? What are you looking to do? Superstar,
world domination, and OnlyFans. Look, people have been making this joke for ages as content creators. I don't know if anyone has jumped yet to make OnlyFans. It's a been a joke for a good 12 months. But I know that at one point there was a beards of Sigmar, and there's some pretty amazing beards in our community. So maybe beards and battle tomes is my next venture. But so I mentioned I made my son's Gargant army for Armies on Parade. So I did Armies on Parade last year, and I was going to run that up until about June, July.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm preparing for CanCon. It hasn't been confirmed yet. It's late January, but it's looking positive right now. So I'm going to take a Daughters of Cain army. Don't boo me, people. But what I'm doing is and anyone who plays Warhammer Fantasy Battles would remember there was a 6th edition Cult of Slaanesh where Slaanesh and Marathi made a pack. And I'm converting up my army. So like my Sisters of Slaughter have claws. I'm doing, even Marathi doesn't have heart render. She's actually got a really cool claw. And I'm building up my Armies on Parade board. And it'll be my CanCon army. So I'll be doing these Cults of Slaanesh in the meantime while my Gargants are done. So I'll play Gargants. I'll build my Daughters. Yeah. And I think one thing I learned over COVID is everyone assumed that we'd come out of this or with painted armies and like they'd be like, masterclass. No. People have been butterflies. They have either put down their hobby tools and they're playing video games or they like me for a while, which was I went through about 7 different projects and never completed any of them. I think I did some endless spells. Then I started building like a 6th edition Empire army because I was going to go to a fantasy tournament. Then I went to did some Zench. I was just all over the place. So I cleared some backlog, but it's all like half painted. So I think tournaments, like the minute the tournaments got announced, it gave me a deadline and I was back in the grind. So I think I learned something about myself is that I need a deadline. Because otherwise I had no incentive to push through. I just jumping over and Games Workshop bring out all these cool models. So I'm like, buy it. And I never finish anything.
Exactly where I'm at right now. I'm just literally surrounded by. I'm literally looking around. I'm just like a project at the moment, like unfinished model. Oh my god!
I think that's where things like I've seen some really cool things on Twitter where people have had a hobby hobbying 30 minutes every day, and they're like putting up with projects or. Kerry Robinson from the Hobby Room has that pilot potential, a tool that helps you have like a project plan or some type of like progression. I think that instead of just amassing this pilot potential is just, I think, getting things done and having a plan. Because I quickly learned without tournaments, I'm a hobby butterfly. I just have my pile is just increasing. And I need Sylvanet to get good again so I can sell my army that I never... I made a Sylvaneth army, right? So I decided 3 years ago that Sylvaneth was going to be my next army. Okay. And I pre-bought the Battle Tome and I bought 2K worth of models. 3K, I've got 15 Kurnoth Hunters. I was going to do a custom-built Orion using Magnus, and I was going to all this crazy stuff. Battle Tome gets released at 12 o'clock. That's when I can pick it up from the store. 7 hours later, that same day, Games Workshop do a preview with Cities of Sigmar. And that's my 4th edition army. That's what I took to Blood and Glory. I took a Empire / Cities of Sigmar before it was Cities to Blood and Glory. So I'm like, cool. Tools down. Sylvaneth, sorry, not sorry. And I've sat there ever since. I love the army, but it's been 3 years. So please, Broken Realms Alariel. Please, Broken Realms Alariel.
Is it still in its boxes, that army? Yeah.
No, I built them all. And
okay.
because I bought the army and then I had the Battle Tome just ready to go. And I picked up the Battle Tome. My Kurnoth Hunters are ready. I worked out: do I take swords or bows? And then those jerks. And I even put up a photo on Twitter, and I'm like, I put a little tree. I put my Battle Tome in the garden. I'm like, the seeds are growing, and some real mad hype. And a couple of hours later, I'm like,
Right. Okay. Well, look. First and foremost, thanks. It's been amazing having you on. It's been great to catch up with you. And as I said, big fan of your content, so it's brilliant to have you over here on Wargameronline as well. But before we close down, if there are still people out there who are wondering, how do I find out more about this big, beautiful, bearded Australian fellow? Where are they looking? Where do they go?
Don't search OnlyFans. Don't search. There is no OnlyFans.
I'm not convinced.
I might be venturing into TikTok. I might. I want to play around with TikTok. There's some cool things going on TikTok. It's probably. I'm trying to set up an interview. I've got somebody in mind. TikTok is an interesting little platform that I initially wrote off as a social media, but actually he's got a little growing community, a little hobby community as well. So, but for people who want to know more, I do have the YouTube channel, AOS Coach. We do lots of cool interviews, a lot of cool discussions. I was very fortunate to have a discussion a few months ago with, Aaron Dembski-Bowden about being a Black Library author and what it's like to write professionally. I think so. We've got a whole mix of content on the channel. I've got a pretty active Discord. Any of my videos will have the link in the Discord. I might even send it to you guys if you want it as well, but feel free to jump in the Discord. It's very hobby-focused Discord. We talk lists, we play games, we just mess around and meme and all that stuff. That's a good community. I don't know, what else? Like, you'll find me. I'm around.
I'll stick some links in. I'll stick some links in the description for everybody to check out as well. So don't forget to scroll down and click some links. Okay.
A shout out to the Australian community. Shout out to everybody who is persisting through COVID. I know we've talked a little bit about tournaments and the being in a fortunate community is not lost to me. Talking to all of you guys in America, talking to all the guys in England and all the other countries who are in lockdown. My heart goes out to you guys, and I hope that, a little bit of some of the things that I've talked about is showing there's light at the end of the tunnel. You guys aren't far off, and hopefully you guys are all gaming again soon, and we can talk about all the cool lists and you're back at tournaments to prepare. Build your army, hate the army, prepare.
Get your habits in.
Every single one of your videos are helping as well, so thank you very much for that. Right, I think that, guys.
Time to watch my videos.
I'm going to say thank you very much. We'll call this show a close. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and more importantly, don't forget to like and subscribe AOS Coach, and we'll see you on the other side. Cheers all.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
This video is made possible by our patrons. If you want to know more about how to support us, click on the link to the right.